And I think that's the one area where you can't rush. You know, if it's like building the foundation of the house. If the foundation of the house is bad,
I believe something you've said to your students is story always comes first. What does this mean to you?
right. And this isn't, I think if we work in the industry, this is a very common thing. This is not some genius thing that I've come up with. Where it comes into play often, and it starts at beginner level, is people often get enamored with the cameras or the microphones or the special effects or the stunts or the whatever it is that is fun when you get on the set, okay? But all of those things are, in service of something else, okay? They're all incredibly amazing crafts, and the people who do them are wonderful craftspeople with so much skill and artistic talent, makeup, props, editing, whatever. It's composers, everyone, all lending a hand in. But if you don't have a great story, they can't do anything, right? You can't even spend money really from a financier. You need that script. And the only way that script gets made is if the story and everything that we've been talking about here in this time works properly, okay? And it's difficult, but that's where you need to be spending most of your time. When I have film students, they don't really want to hear stuff like that. Well, that's not fair. They maybe haven't thought about that. I think when they're quite young, they just think, oh, cameras and lights and microphones and actors and, flash pots or however, digital explosions or whatever they do now. They don't really, I've had often students didn't really realize how crafted these things were. I was showing them episodes of Sex Education being played, of that, along with the script running side by side. And it wasn't actually the filming script, it was a development script. So I could say, look how they changed the lines and look how they represented this camera movement, look at how they described the space that the characters are in. And they were surprised at how crafted the thing was and how much work went into the storytelling. I think you were talking about rushing, and I think that's the one area where you can't rush. If it's like building the foundation of the house. If the foundation of the house is bad, and all the other stuff. So spend your time on your story, get the story right, get the characters correct. What are you talking about? What is this world? What are the obstacles? What's the drama? What's the tension? What are you trying to say? Work on that, and all the rest is fun.
Do we often think, though, that we as the writer are the hero and that if we put in all these cool little scenes, it'll work, but really it has to make sense to the audience? And how do we know that, though?
Well, God, I really hope writers don't think that. Maybe writers that are inexperienced know that. I can't think, it's difficult. I know artists have egos, writers are artists, they can have egos and that sort of thing. And I think you have to, a delicate balance of tamping that down but sticking up for yourself for the story is a balance there. I hope that writers would think everything we're doing is in service of the story. Okay? Everything I'm doing is in service of telling the best thing that I possibly can, right? And I'm going to take all these steps to do that as such. So should this piece of literature make it to the production stage, the craftspeople on the other side, as led by the director, can make something worthy of what you've written, okay? So, yeah, I truly hope that they are thinking that they can get past the isn't it cool and get to does it all work and does it make sense and am I trying to say something? And I always think of, in this case, Almost Famous, when Patrick Fugit's having that dark night of the soul and he calls back to Philip Seymour Hoffman and he says, the only true currency you have in this world is what you share when you're uncool. And that's then the thing that unlocks his creativity and turns in the article to Rolling Stone. And I think that's the lesson here, is that if you have that truth, even if it's ugly truth and it's ugly to you, then you'll be all right.
What is your favorite story?
That's a big question. I think my favorite story is, my favorite book that I ever read was East of Eden, Steinbeck. He's my favorite writer, by far. I know a lot of people like Dickens, but he's my favorite one. And it has everything that I really like about storytelling in there. I realize it's not movies or TV, but it's got this big landscape of, the Northern California. It's got this Cain and Abel story in it, these two brothers, and what their family is going through. And I just like the epicness of it. But at the center of it, and it's usually all the characters have to answer it or talk about it in some way, is the difference between may and shall. Okay, thou mayest, they shall, which is and basically the difference between it's basically a free will or non-free will, or, not free will story at its sense. But the way that Steinbeck did it, and he looked at it from different points of view. I think some of my favorite ones is there's a Chinese character in it. Talk about what was going on at the time. He had these immigrants coming in, Chinese immigrants that now make up a lot of San Francisco and Northern California in it. And he was part of this community, and he would go into the city and in his community, and they would be arguing about may versus shall, using their culture's definitions of those words and what does that mean, and they would have long arguments above it, and then those discussions would directly be played out in what was going on between in the family, between the sons and the father and the wife of one of them, and the problem was going on with the business and whatnot. And I also love the way Steinbeck writes, because he often will be talking very common language about how people spoke in that time. So he'll be writing in very colloquial language of the time. And then when he goes into his narration, he'll talk in very sort of philosophical ways. And I love those two, the dichotomy of that. I love the juxtaposition of that. And even that sort of the characters that you think are very plain will often have epiphanies on such a level, okay, in very simple ways. They'll say something very simply, but it's very profound. And I love that. And that's why that's my favorite story.
Have you ever gone back and kind of done a John Steinbeck tour and seen where he lived and where he was a writer? And
we did a bit of that. We went up north a little bit, up through the Central Coast and along the central coast and also the Central Valley. I have been up there a bit, and it's great. It's one of the reasons I love California, is that you have these, not everything is hot, and not everything is the beach and the sunshine. And everything is all these different communities, different political viewpoints, different cultural viewpoints. The whole idea that you think that you have these two enormous cities, but yet in the middle is where everything is grown.
Right.
And I think that plus a whole Pacific rocky coast that's different every time you make a turn. I just love that sort of soup.
And how does John Steinbeck's work influence your work?
I think it's that thing that I said at the end. It's common, this sort of everyday people experiencing profoundness or understanding profoundness, getting to a truth of some sort, or epiphany or realization, at least what they think it is, okay? And then even if that's false, then this is usually what I'm trying to say, is this. But I usually tend to write common. I don't tend to write fantastical things. I tend to write, everyday people. And I think that that's probably what I take for it, and trying to get to that simple truth.
And what is it about, especially in this new day and age of social media influencer and people going viral and we being so fascinated with some story of somebody having an argument on an airplane, and then we want to know, who is this person, and what is it about this simple person that is not really simple, but maybe to the tabloids, it's not something that's worth writing about? What is that person to you?
If I understand your question correctly, I think that, we all have, I think that a common person going through, or an ordinary person going through something extraordinary, or at least extraordinary to them, okay, is always a great place to start a story from, because it happens to all of us. We've all had, you probably today had something where you started the day, you thought it was going to this happen, and then something tripped you up, okay? Probably, right? And that led you to this and that and that. And even if it's like, if I had just gone left instead of right, or if I had made eggs instead of bacon, okay, my life, things would have been different. Maybe you got sick from the bacon, right? And that ruined all your things for the day. Whatever it is, I think it goes back to what we've been saying this whole time. If you have a world that people can understand, or that you understand really well, and you can find out what the obstacles would be and who the characters would be in those world, you can make it then, and if it's as close to our world as possible, it can be accessible to those that you're trying to tell the story. If I was trying to tell a story about how bacon made me sick and I had ruined my day to someone who doesn't know what bacon is, or doesn't eat bacon, or is completely a nightlife person, and they don't have that experience of waking up in the morning, they're kind of like, yeah. But I think most, but it's the key thing there is, even though eating the bacon and getting sick from it is most people have it, it's my experience of doing it. And then it's up to me as the writer, when I'm conveying the story, to take my spin on to make it interesting, and so on and so forth, everything I've been saying this whole time.